Creedence Clearwater Revival were hugely successful in their day. People forget now just how many hits they had. It seemed like, I think it was a dozen straight top 10 hits in America, one number one in Britain, but it seemed at one point as if they were dominating the charts.
Round mirror, keep on burning, rolling.
The hallmark is simplicity, is swampy, blues-based, passionate rock and roll.
There's some great stuff going on in there. Fantastic songs, great playing, simple, straight to the point, lots of emotion.
Bad Moon Rising, Up Around the Bend, Down on the Corner, all just 3-chord songs. How much fun can you have with 3 chords?
Big wheel, keep on turning. Round mirror, keep on burning, rolling.
When I turn on the radio, I hear half the songs I hear seem like they're Creedence songs. You know, if I was in a new band today, I'd be jealous. We had secured a record contract with Fantasy Records, a small West Coast jazz label in San Francisco, California. And one of the fellows who owned the label gave us the name the Gollywogs because he thought it sounded very British, Invasion. The name was like so ridiculous that, and the costumes that he dressed us up in, finally got to the point where we said, look, you know, this isn't us. And so we threw that stuff away and never turned back. We changed the name to Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Creedence Clearwater Revival, what does it all mean? Kind of signifies something perhaps a little bit religious, a bit gospel-y.
Tom knew a fellow named Creedence. He worked with him at Pacific Gas and Electric for years. A fellow from South Africa. And the Clearwater refers to the new ecological attitudes that were starting to spread, and you know, and the revival was about the personal revival that we were all recommitting ourselves to really, you know, go at this full time. By then we were convinced that what we wanted to do was make records and, you know, be on the radio and you know, see our name up on the marquee and go as far as we could.
Been an awful long time since I've been home, but you won't catch me going back down there alone. Things they said when I was young were quite enough to get me home. I don't care.
The first self-titled album was not a huge hit in '68. I think it reached number 52 in the States. The band was still refining and developing their sound. There were some great things. The track Gloomy, which was very Beatlesque with its backwards guitars and everything else. Porterville is, to this day, stands up as being a really great, effective rocker. Put a Spell on You, interesting cover version. They weren't averse to doing cover versions of songs if they thought they could put their original stamp on it.
People found it very familiar. The music somehow seemed homely. It had that down-home feeling to it, and it was kind of a relief, I think, for people to find something they could relate to and understand quickly, and they weren't confronted by some mysterious psychedelic sort of imagery. Everything had been very revolutionary up to that point, and here was a band that were progressing musically. I mean, they were playing great stuff, they were a good band, but they were harking back to the roots of American music.
Oh, Susie Q. Oh, Susie Q. Oh, Susie Q. Baby, I love you. Susie Q. Like the way you walk. I like the way you talk. I like the way you walk. I like the way you talk. Susie Q.
They admired their heroes from the 1950s, you know, Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and this, and so I think there was a lot of this, we wanted to emulate these fellas, but we're living in changing times. It's no longer the late 50s anymore. Rock and roll is very different, so they were able to sort of combine that. There was nobody else at the time that was taking 50s songs and, you know, making them like 7 minutes long, like, you know, Put a Spell on You or Susie Q.
The great thing about it, unlike a lot of their 2- and 3-minute hits, this was an elongated song that had a groove and you could really get into it for a long time in the car. It's one of those songs that you can crank and sing along to and just play your air guitar to, and Susie Q's it for me.
Say that you'll be true. Say that you'll be true. Say that you'll be true and never leave me blue. Susie Q.
Susie Q was one of those rarities on this album that came out of the gate that showed their ability to experiment and again flex their musical muscles.
We're playing 5 hours a night, and we're running out of songs to play. You know, this is in summer, fall of '67. And I said, well, John, you know, we could play Susie Q, and we could do it like this, and then, you know, do a regular solo, and then come back and oh Susie Q, and Baby I Love You, oh Susie Q, and then we could do we can play for like 10 or 15 minutes. And, you know, we'll be done with the set before long, you know. And so we quickly whipped up an arrangement of it, and that's the arrangement that made it to the record. It was our first endeavor into, you know, ballroom jamming.
They'd been working as a touring band all throughout Northern California for a very long time. So when they went into the studios to record their first album, they'd worked a long time on these different songs, and they knew what songs worked well with an audience. They knew what songs would get people up and dancing. They knew what songs people would request a lot.
Our approach to recording was learn what you're going to do, you know, and go in and do it. You know, it's not we never thought the studio was a place to get creative. We knew what we wanted to do when we went to the studio, and most of the songs were in the first 2 or 3 takes. And I think Susie Q might have been a take 1.
The thing about this album, I think, was it was the template for Bayou Country and Green River, which were the 2 very successful albums that followed it. So it was a great solid start, but it wasn't the commercial success that was about to explode with the next 2 records.
We were a good band. You know, we played well together. We have a real memorable sound. Doug and I have a instantly recognizable sound as a rhythm section, bass and drums.
These guys could pull off what they were shown in the studio. This is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. Take 1.
The tempos rarely drifted, and this was way back in the days before bands started to use click tracks to keep themselves in time.
That was the perfect backing for John Fogerty's band. Did they stand out as, you know, aficionados of their instruments? Well, no, that wasn't what the band was about. Were they proficient? Absolutely. Did they work well together? Clearly.
I wanted a drum set. Both my parents worked, so they gave me an opportunity to get a job. I worked every weekend, and I was a gardener and the maid, you know, and I did the dishes during the week. And that's how I got my bread for the, you know, for the thing. They didn't have to do that. Like, they could have just said, look, we're working, you work too.
The thing about Doug Clifford as a drummer, for instance, is he's quite funky and he swings. You know, a lot of American drummers have got that in the pocket straight away. That's one of the things they're great at. And he was able to keep it rock solid and simple, but swinging.
We're straight ahead, nothing fancy. Try and keep it consistent and in the pocket, and you know, be supportive of the song.
Actually, when they first started, they didn't sound that brilliant. There were moments when the group sounded a little bit rough and ready, I thought, and a little bit lame, actually, if you listen to Susie Q in the early recordings.
You know, when I listen to some of the early stuff, you know, sometimes I cringe. You know, I'm going, well, you know, that's just the way it was that day.
Tom is the only member that wasn't born in 1945. He was 4 years older than the other boys. I think maybe he brought a bit of a maturity and a bit of a different angle to the band.
I love music. I consider it a good thing. I don't love it because I think it's good. I just love it.
He was originally the lead singer, did all the singing for the band when they were the Gollywogs and the Blue Velvets. But as time went by and John Fogerty started writing more songs, he started taking over more of the singing in it. And I think maybe for Tom, maybe, you know, it was maybe a humbling thing, you know, letting his brother start taking over this and that.
He and John were always, you know, there was a sibling rivalry. Doug and I often felt we were in a Fogarty sandwich, you know. We were the lettuce and the onion and the meat between these two pieces of bread, you know. That, you know, the sibling rivalry was there and it was strong.
I can't underestimate the value of Tom Fogarty, though. I've always had a soft spot for great rhythm guitar players, and for me, Tom Fogarty was actually one of the best rhythm players in the world. He was just content to sit back and play a driving rhythm.
When I think of CCR in terms of 4 guys in a band, I mean, like a lot of people, I have to admit I think of John Fogarty with a great band in behind him. I mean, they each played their roles quite well. But it was Fogarty's band, and Fogarty's the front man, and I think we all have the greatest affinity for John.
We may start too fast. Well, I don't know if in person. Yeah, relax a little more instead of you know, driving like that, because the record isn't quite a driving thing. It's more a relaxed shuffle almost. You know.
He did all the arranging. He wrote most of their songs that were hits. And the other fellas were very, you know, willing to follow his direction. I think, you know, when you look at his songs and his influences in music, a lot of that comes through in their stuff. So I think, you know, very much he had a lot of influence in the CCR sound, their stylings, their image, what songs they decided to cover.
It is a band of 4 strong personalities, and without people throwing their opinions into the pot about songs and arrangements and sounds and how what direction they should go in, they would never have had the strength that they had as a unit. So I think it's very unfair to say that they were John's backing band.
Looking for a job in the city, working for the man every night and day, and I never lost 1 minute of sleep, worrying about the way things might have been.
Second album was Bayou Country, and that was that's my favorite album.
Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river.
Bayou Country is an album that got to number 7, and it spawned a number 2 American single in Proud Mary. They'd found their feet, let's be honest. John Fogarty had found his feet as a songwriter. He'd developed a songwriting style, and there were just some classic tracks on there.
The second album, Bayou Country, definitely put these guys on the map. You know, John Fogarty writing fantastic songs.
We took a little more time on it. I think we might have taken 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 to do this one. Because we were so comfortable with the material that, you know, we were able to try some things in the studio that, you know, to see if this way was better than that way.
Proud Mary was the song that really put Creedence Clearwater Revival on the map. This was the tremendously powerful and interesting concept, really. Very descriptive piece of music.
John Fogarty wrote Proud Mary just after he got his papers saying that he had finished his time in the National Guard or the Reserves, and he went outside and did cartwheels on the lawn of his apartment building. And then later that day he wrote Proud Mary. It was a song that was sort of rolling around in his head for quite a while. And again, it was all these different visions he had of what the South was like, and, you know, the time of like paddle wheelers on the Mississippi River.
Tells a great story about the South. You know, it was sort of as close to a Tin Pan Alley song as Creedence ever did. You know, it was a homage, and but it had a great groove. You know, it had a great sound.
A driving guitar song. Creedence used to write a lot of songs in the key of D, which is a very up-sounding key. It's a bright, vibrant sounding key, which is great for guitars, particularly in the way they use them. It's a really simple song, and aside from the chords in the intro, it's based around 2 or 3 chords.
So you've got an intro, which basically goes like this, and they're all major chords, which is quite interesting as well. There's no minor chords in this intro at all. So basically the chords there are C major to A major, C major to A major, C major to A major to G major to F major to D major. Then the main verse is just over 1 chord, the chord of D major. And that's it. And there's a little bridge that takes you up to the chorus, which is A major to B minor to the chorus, which is back to the D. Rolling on a river. And the strange thing about it is, I think other songwriters might change the chords to fit the melody, but he doesn't bother. And in essence, you don't need to.
Riff was reminiscent of the paddle wheeler rotating, and it was just amazing how this thing worked.
It was unique. Nothing sounded like that song at the time, and while it didn't become a #1 hit, it got close. It was a #2 hit in 1969, and I think because it was unique, nothing sounded like it.
Really strong, original composition. John's first big classic. You know, I mean, the song has gone on to be recorded by, you know, must be over 100 people, maybe 200 by now.
Rolling on the river.
We were real confident that Bayou Country was a noticeable, you know, leap in the band's growth. John's growth as a writer, our improvement as ensemble players. We were really happy with it. It had a great sound, a big fat sound. Probably our best sounding album.
Keep on shooting, keep on shooting, keep on shooting, maybe you don't understand if you're natural man.
Keep On Choogling was very hypnotic, all built around about 1 or 2 notes, a very simple bass line and a rhythm guitar pulse, really. Some people reacted quite badly to it, and other people became obsessed by it. It's one of those numbers that you don't want to stop.
Keep on choogling, keep on choogling, 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 choogling.
Keep On Choogling was just a typical, straightforward John Fogerty rant that was fun. I mean, CCR songs didn't have to mean a whole lot, didn't have to be deep.
When you first hear it, you think, oh, here we go again, another sort of swamp of vamp around 1 chord, which essentially it is. But actually, what they do with it, by introducing, you know, harmonica, some just slightly more unusual sort of blues licks, something that you can really tell they're having fun, and that's why it works.
Again, it's about as much fun as you can have with 1 chord. The soloing reminds me very much of Neil Young, in that it's not always spot on. There's the odd sour note in there, if you like, but it doesn't seem to matter because it's delivered with amazing fire.
Bayou Country was, I think, played live in its entirety for weeks and weeks and weeks before we ever went into the studio. So these songs were songs that we were so in command of, so on top of, that we owned this material.
The name of the album, these guys played up on the rumor that they were from Louisiana and the Bayou, and the styles that this band could pull off from Louisiana, Tex-Mex, Bayou, swamp, blues, rock, pop, Americana storytelling. It was just quite fascinating. I think these guys had quite the chuckle because they're all from the West Coast and, out of San Francisco, and everybody thought that they were from the Bayou.
Born on the Bayou is an odd song, really, for a San Francisco band or a West Coast band. Back at that time, everyone was into love, peace and flower power. There was all of this psychedelic stuff that was coming out of the West Coast of America. And yet here comes Creedence Clearwater Revival singing about almost a voodoo, swampy, dark deeds kind of song, that whole image of the Deep South. I mean, I can't hear Born on the Bayou without fancying some Cajun food. It really is as simple as that.
When we started getting more and more of our own voice, it sounded more like the South, which is where the music we love came from, be it white guys singing the blues or black guys singing the blues, And so, we didn't really have any first-hand experience with the South. And so we just kind of took it from the music, the stories and the style of playing, and kind of imagined all the rest of it.
When you listen to a certain genre of music and you start picking up the nuances in the music and then start, incorporating it into your own sound, it's definitely going to come out. And I think, when you listen to it, most CCR songs, you really get this feel of the Deep South and kind of spooky, moody, swampy type music.
The first time we went to the South, we were in Louisiana, and I think we were in Baton Rouge, which is the state capital. We tried to check into our hotel room, and the guys, they wouldn't let us check in because we had long hair. So it was like they didn't think we were from the South. They knew darn well we were from San Francisco.
Well, Green River was actually an interesting album because it had much more of a rock sort of feel to it, I suppose, epitomised by Commotion, which is a sort of song that sums up urban angst. I think they got back to the big city on that one, away from the bayou, and although it does have a kind of Red Indian warpath drum introduction.
Certainly the track Commotion, which is actually played in E but detuned down a tone to D, that huge dark sound from the guitars, it was a heavy rock track virtually. But I think they'd always suggested being a rock band from before then.
So much going on, I just can't keep it. I'm commotion, get gone. I'm commotion, get gone.
What they were listening to, the British invasion, for instance, that was coming in. Even the Beatles were quite tough in their early records. I think they were just trying to get a little bit of that into their sound.
In a lot of ways, the English invasion was a great eye-opener for American musicians, because they just took American music and threw it back at us. So when people like John Mayall, would be, presented such a hard, and the Yardbirds, and all these guys, such a hardcore American music, with a little bit of a spin on it, but boy, was it, they're more true to it than American players have become.
Green River was more of a rock album as opposed to their first album, and I think I think at the time a lot of the songs, a lot of them were sort of set up because they were getting a bit of success with AM radio, so they were thinking, okay, let's make some of our songs 3 minutes long as opposed to 6 or 7 minutes long or 5 minutes long. So I think that was a big push for that album.
I don't think of CCR as a sellout to any degree. I mean, they were a band who wrote great songs you could sing along to.
Green River was archetypal Creedence to me, the Bayou feeling again, the Cajun feeling. But then you have songs like Lodi, which is John Fogerty's love song about, I think it was about him being on the road and away from this particular lady, is a fantastic rock ballad.
Just about a year ago, I set out on the road, seeking my fame and fortune, looking for a pot of gold. Things got bad and things got worse, I guess you know the tune.
At that time, these guys were putting out albums, 3 of them almost in a year. I mean, now, that's unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. So you can tell the progression of this band musically from album to album in a matter of months, from into the studio, commercially successful on the radio, touring live shows, back in the studio, writing on the road or wherever it happens to be, and again, flexing their muscles every time they go back into the studio, cranking it up another notch.
Green River was a good album. They were very prolific at that time. They seemed to be producing an album every few months, and under great pressure as well, of course, to come up with more hits. And Bad Moon Rising was one of the tracks on that album, and of course that was one of their biggest hits.
Bad Moon Rising was our first #1 hit in England, and a simple country tune, a rockabilly type tune, and just one note on the bass. Dun, 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 dun.
The song basically is based around 3 chords, which is the chord of D major, A major, and G major. That's the whole song. It's just moved around in different ways. So the main body of the song goes like this. Then there's another little section, because there's 2 guitar players in the band. One guitar player is playing that, and the other guitar player, every time he gets back to the D major chord, is playing. Which is a real country lick. A great little lick actually. It's very simple but really effective. One of the strengths of Creedence Clearwater Revival, just picking out the right little licks for the song.
Fogerty's voice on Bad Moon Rising is actually like a musical instrument. It's actually quite a musical sounding voice, and the way the track builds is just total simplicity, just the little guitar licks in the second verse, doesn't need anything more than that, no kitchen sink, just again Tom Fogerty's relentless rhythm guitar.
It was contemporary performance, and yet it had that feel for 50s rock and roll. Lots of echo and driving drums, and great piece of work.
Bad Moon Rising, musical highlight of that album?
For me it is, I know. And we've all heard this in a variety of films over the years, and you'll want to either run out and grab the album or throw it back on your CD player or call the radio station if you want to hear that, or you want to go and rent the movie again. It's such a great song.
Hope you got your things together.
I know that when John Fogerty wrote that song, he'd read about this story about a fellow who made a pact with the devil, and then this hurricane went through the valley. On only his farm, all the grain was still standing, and he thought, wow, this is an interesting thing, and hearing the phrase, like, I think there's going to be a bad moon arising, just taking a little simple phrase like that and building this whole sort of song on it.
We're talking about voodoo and some dark deeds at night, and lyrics like, I hope you're prepared to die, and yet it makes you smile. There was a vitality and humour in his voice that managed to lift you even in some of his darkest lyrics.
When that song was #1 in England, we had a little celebration down at the record company and a little champagne toast, and Doug and I proceeded to head out on the road and get into a car, motorcycle, and a third party. We were all involved in an accident together, and his Porsche was totaled, my motorcycle was totaled, and I was on crutches for about a week, but no serious damage, but gotta watch out for those celebrations. Can't get too excited about these things.
Green River was a tighter, more disciplined album from before. There was less obvious aimless jamming there, so it was maybe more tightly organised, but I think John Fogerty was getting more aware of production techniques. That's not to say that it was overproduced in any way, far from it, but I think it was more disciplined, and the fact that it was a #1 album with 2 #2 singles, and we're talking about America here, which were big sales, shows that the fans certainly were ready for more.
We were recording as fast as John wrote the songs. I think John was afraid that we would, if we didn't always have a single on the charts, we would just disappear.
Down on the Corner was from William the Poor Boys, and actually this is another example of Creedence Clearwater moving on to a slightly different feel, away from the Bayou and maybe towards the Caribbean.
That was a very tough song for us to record because we just kept wanting to speed it up, and it had to have that, a bit of a laid-back, off the beat feel, and we'd never played a song like that. In fact, we might have said, hey John, this isn't rock and roll, we might have been resistant.
Yes, perhaps this is a little bit more funky, but it's not James Brown, and it's not Sly Stone. It feels more poppy than funky.
People just gotta smile. Think his songs have got face, head and shoulders for a while. Poor boy twang the rhythm out on his Kalamazoo. Willie goes into a dance.
The album that it's taken from, it just conjures up that image of guys that are willing to play for a few nickels and just go out and busk. It's about a bunch of buskers, basically, if you think about it.
Blue collar, working man, pop, rock, CCR. It hits a nerve and hits the nail on the head.
And that song, again, another hook. Dun, 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 dun. Bass and guitar throughout the whole song, really. Then the rhythm.
Great rhythm section work on this. It's a shuffling, almost a Latin samba beat to it. One of those grooves that not many rock bands have ever explored, and yet it still sounds timeless today.
That's what really made songs like Down on the Corner and that sort of the hallmarks of what the CCR sound was evolving into, sort of more from the swamp rock sounds of their first two albums. And again, you see a whole set of new influences start coming into their music at that point.
Some people think of rock bands as being outside the political spectrum, or they should stay outside the political spectrum, and others, applaud when the U2s and CCRs, thinking of Fortunate Son, come to the party and express their political views, and I'm all for it. Did they stray too far from being a straight-ahead rock and roll band that sounded like they were out of the South? Probably not. I mean, Fortunate Son seems to be the only track anybody ever refers to in context of CCR being political.
I want people to know when I'm really saying something seriously and when I'm just being an entertainer, But it's also important that then I don't appeal to basic motivations, that I don't start, hey, all you hippies, join together and let's smoke dope, I mean, people are going to dig that, a certain element of society, but I don't want them digging it for that. I want them to look a little further than just, hey, okay, we're all together, brother, and that crap. I tried to stay away from, hey, he's a left-wing radical crazy, or he's a super bircher, because both sides can take it, and use it as their own rallying cry. Same as Fortunate Son, really. You can see all the Minutemen, the birchers saying, wow, the Fortunate Son, yeah, I hate them people too.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue. And when the band plays Hail to the Chief, ooh, they point the cannon at you. Lord, it ain't me. It ain't me. I ain't no senator, son. It ain't me. It ain't me. I ain't no fortunate one.
At the time, I think music was more important to the whole political debate. The era was rife with political dissent, the Vietnam War, and just a whole lot of social changes going on. And the song spoke to the inequities in who was actually doing the fighting and the dying, and who was not doing the fighting and the dying.
Fortunate Son still sounds very angry when you listen to it now. It's John Fogerty suddenly going off at a tangent.
Basically, he'd seen on television Pat Nixon or some of the Nixon kids, and he was thinking, like, these are American kids the same age as me, yet they're never going to go to Vietnam, and I think that's where he wrote that, people that are high up in government, they don't want to send their kids off to a war, but they're willing to pass bills to send other parents' kids off to war.
A great menacing sound. It's actually played with guitar A shapes, but they're detuned a tone, and they were very fond of detuning the guitars to get this great driving dark sound.
One of 3 anti-war tracks on that album, right place, right time. Again, he summed it up in simple words, and it worked.
We were all quite political. John and Doug both were in the armed forces and had to fight their way out so we could even have the band. Finally, they were both discharged, and we proceeded, but we continued our strong opposition to the war. But at the same time, you have to support the guys doing the fighting. They didn't pick the war.
Well, you wake up in the morning, you hear the work bell ring, and I march you to the table. You see the same old thing.
Midnight Special from Willie and the Poor Boys album is a highlight, definitely. It's a lead belly song, and I think once again they really enjoyed doing it. They enjoyed playing it. They stretched out a little bit on it in as far as they would like to stretch out.
Let the midnight special shine a light on.
Definitely CCR were experimental because they would take a lot of songs from the 50s, like the Midnight Special, for instance, and change it and make it sort of more of a product of their times. Instead of just basically copying the sound, they add a lot to it.
Let the midnight special shine a ever-loving light on me. Yonder come Miss Rosie.
The gospel tune that we, attempted to rock a little bit, but I think the multi-part harmonies that John is singing on the track really add sort of that gospel southern, church thing to it almost, and it's an interesting arrangement. Actually, when I think of that song, I really don't think of anybody else's arrangement of it but Creedence.
Let the midnight special shine a light on me.
Personally, I found it a bit plodding and a bit remedial, and I applaud their simplicity on one hand, but that song just doesn't do it for me.
Again, the detuned guitar, down a tone, this lovely gospel kind of vibe to it, and the way it meanders from a shuffle into a straight feel and then back into a shuffle later on. One of the best ever vocals from Fogerty on this song.
If you have all your Houston, well, you better do right. You better not gamble, and you better not bite on.
Well, John Fogerty had this marvellous knack of combining playing guitar and singing, and not exactly at the same time. It's a great folk tradition or blues tradition that you sort of answer yourself. You play a phrase and then answer back to it. But no, he had a very mature, smoky, powerful voice.
He had that certain sound that was developed after album after album. It's not really a screaming sound, but it was a growl, and it was so distinct and so unique. It was CCR.
He never shouted, yet he was always very commanding in the way he sang to you.
Yeah, that's why the black audiences loved him so much. Incredibly soulful. He was obviously greatly influenced by Little Richard, but amazing power and range.
And his lyrics and his melodies were really very memorable and very simple.
In terms of style and passion and grit and intensity, it's hard to find someone who had more than John Fogerty in the context of what they were doing as a band.
Let the midnight special shine a light on me.
I think Willie and the Poor Boys was in a lot of ways probably the pinnacle when you consider that afterwards Cosmo's Factory and then the albums that followed that seemed to sort of be the band was maturing to the point where there's other issues involved with the members wanting to do their own thing maybe and stuff like that.
This was a #3 album in the States, Willie and the Poor Boys, and it's probably about as good as it gets in terms of a feel-good rock album. The sleeve says it all. They're standing there with a chest bass and a washboard and everything else, which they actually used, I believe, on Poor Man Shuffle, and it works. It works a treat.
When you think of Willie and the Poor Boys by CCR, I mean, some people think of it as a pinnacle, but I go to something like Cosmo's Factory and count up the hits. There's got to be a half dozen on that record. And I'm not just all about CCR hits. There's great musicality. You think of a song like the cover of I Heard It Through the Grapevine. That's as musical as CCR.
Instead, I played it to the grapevine. Not much longer would you be mine. Ooh, I played it to the grapevine. And I'm just about to lose my mind. Honey, yeah.
Cosmo's Factory was named after where we rehearsed, which was the factory. And that came from where we rehearsed before that. Before we were successful, we rehearsed in Doug Clifford's backyard in a little room, and a shack. So when we did the 5th album, John asked Doug if he minded calling it Cosmo's Factory. And Doug said, of course not, you know. So we had the picture on the cover of everybody, you know, with their toys, John's motorcycle and Doug's bike and, you know, my toy piano. Yeah, I mean, it was where we worked every day. You know, we went to work every day. And, you know, we had a pool table there and sofa, and, you know, we'd sit around, play cards.
Cosmo's Factory is a meandering of styles. Personally, for me, my favorite CCR album. We always get calls for that particular album. Can I hear a side of this or a track from Cosmo's Factory? For me, as I was getting into this band, it took like probably 3 or 4 albums, and by the time I got to Cosmo's Factory, I was totally in love with this band, and I loved it from front to back cover.
The album band was a homage to Little Richard, and interestingly enough, the company that owned the copyright to most of Little Richard's material sued John over that song, claiming it was stolen from one of Little Richard's songs. Well, I mean, how close can a song be, you know, when you're paying tribute to somebody and you write a song, you know, then they say, oh, sorry, but you stole that from us. You kind of wondered where did it backfire? Where did it go wrong?
Traveling Band is straight ahead rock and roll from CCR. Plugged in, turned up, aggressive CCR.
I think that's probably John's most outrageous vocal performance of the entire career. I mean, that is such a burning, screaming song. I mean, that's rock and roll right there.
It's a clever lyric about life on the road. I know there have been lots of songs about life on the road, but with John Fogerty's Acid Wicks, it's a very interesting lyric.
This particular song actually kind of perfectly sums up the mood and feeling of the lifestyle experienced by a band on the road. Obviously by that time, Creedence Clearwater had been on the road for about 2 years.
The band during that period, you know, they were doing 3 things. They were playing gigs, they were writing songs, they were recording. They were playing gigs, they were writing songs, they were recording. They were playing gigs, they were writing songs, they were recording. So they were a traveling band.
We played at Woodstock, although most people don't know that because we weren't in the film and we weren't on the initial album release. Ultimately, John didn't agree that the band should be included. I think it was a big mistake because not only was that a sort of a seminal event in the history of, you know, musical evolution, particularly our kind of music, you know, it was also a career breaker.
You could tell the track record of this band and the miles traveled and songs written and experiences digested, and it all came out in the album.
Just got home from Illinois, locked the front door, oh boy. Got to sit down, take a rest on the porch. Imagination sets in, pretty soon I'm singing. Looking out my back door. This giant doing cartwheels, statue wearing high heels. Look at all the happy creatures dancing on the lawn.
I never made a correlation when I listened to CCR singles to drugs. I mean, certainly there were references to, you know, being late 60s. It was in the height of the era, and Vietnam references certainly, but in terms of out and out drug references, never made the correlation. Don't think that's what they were about at all.
One less apparition
Well, definitely when you hear like that song, Looking Out My Back Door, it definitely sounds like a drug trip, you know, a person seeing all these things going on.
None of the Creedence songs were drug reference songs. Just because you have an imagination doesn't mean that you're taking drugs. I mean, the song is, you know, like a cartoon in a way. You know, it's just you close your eyes and you just imagine things, you know, elephants and you know, all this stuff going on. Well, why not? You know, I mean, why do you have to be high or be talking about chemicals to come up with that?
The thing about Cosmo's Factory that really, stands out for me is the diversity of songs on the record. You've got something as long and improvisational as I heard it through the grapevine. You've got the traditional CCR hits like Up Around the Bend and Looking Out My Back Door. And then you've got probably one of the coolest songs that CCR ever did, Run Through the Jungle. It perpetuated the myth that these guys came out of the swamps. It was an extension to me of a Susie Q, you know, rich and deep and fervent and passionate. And you know what, it really explored, for me, the sounds that you would expect to have heard in the jungles of, say, Vietnam. I mean, what a track, Run Through the Jungle.
Here were Creedence relentlessly churning out hits. And another number one album with Cosmo's Factory. I think it was absolutely fantastic.
What was really sad at the time, we were in a bit of a dispute with our record label, Fantasy, over contractual issues. Basically, they promised us that they would give us a good deal, a real good deal, if we got successful. And we came back to them and said, well, where's that deal? And they said, well, we'll live with what we have. And so it was heartbreaking, actually. It took a toll on the band, and particularly on John. John felt that, you know, that given how little the record company was doing, that we just had to keep, you know, we were on our own. We had to keep doing this. And Doug, I can remember Doug said, John, you know, if you want to bring these guys to their knees, stop giving them records. Pendulum was an album which sort of marked the end of the band. That was the last quartet album. We actually took 3+ weeks making that album, recorded in San Francisco at Wally Heider's.
This was the album where the other band members came into play and wanted to write their own songs and not let Fogerty do the entire album.
If you're in a band, and even if you're a member of the band, and even if you're getting paid, but things have changed from the beginning where, you know, you're still making money, but you don't have so much of a say, and you don't have so much musical input because the record company is saying, but John wants this or John wants that, or the management's saying, but let's do what John wants because John is the focal point, and John, you know, it's going to fall apart. And I think that's reflected quite clearly in Pendulum.
Tom had announced that he was leaving, and or, you know, wanted to do things different. You know, wanted more input, and at that point, you know, we said, well, let's just do this album like we've been doing them. You know, we're going in the studio in 2 weeks. You know, what are we going to do? So we all agreed that, you know, we would continue with the formula for this album, but it just didn't feel the same.
The overall essence that I get from the album is it's not as overtly joyous as, say, Willie and Cosmo's Factory. There's a feeling of the joy within the band that absolutely emanates from those albums. It just pours out of the grooves. You can see them laughing and having a good time when they're making the albums. And this one, with the experimentation with other instruments, the horns and keyboards and things, you tend to think, well, we're getting a bit more serious. We're making the next album, you know. And to me, it seems less overtly feel good than the previous stuff.
Won't you hold me?
The songs, I don't think sparkle. You know, they don't have that rock and roll innocence. I can only just call it an innocence. You know, that's gone.
CCR is among countless bands that had to live up to great heights attained early in their career, and Pendulum, being a latter-day album for CCR, had just a couple of hits. So in those terms, it might be looked upon as a disappointment. But in the course of their career, it's another in a series of great CCR records.
Pagan Baby and Chameleon from the Pendulum album are interesting variations. It was still a successful album. It was a #5 album in the States, but Fogerty was willing to experiment more by bringing in horn sections, even a choir on one track. Rude Awakening #2 is the one that probably the only Creedence Clearwater track that I could actually say I don't really like this track at all. It's like they're delving into prog rock, and it just does not work with a good time band like Creedence.
Pendulum has a standout track in Have You Ever Seen the Rain? It stands among the top 10 CCR tracks.
It could have been an Eagles song.
It was a #8 hit, not like #2, which they usually got in the States. Another descriptive piece of music with very striking lyrics from John. He always manages to draw a phrase out somewhere that sticks out, talking about the calm before the storm.
It's a fantastic sort of melancholic vibe to the song. It's not really sad, but it makes you feel a bit melancholy.
Have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day, right? There's that one and the other, the pendulum, this way, that way, no longer in the middle, swinging.
Definitely the highlight of that album. As this band was starting to wrap up, you could almost sense that it was almost over.
The picture on the back of the album, there's the three of us, and then there's Tom separately in a window. So the whole thing just kind of came together in a way that spoke to what the next phase would be, which was the trio album.
The last studio album, I think, was Mardi Gras in '72.
John Fogerty decided to loosen the reins a little, allow the other guys their chance to contribute more to the music. Obviously there'd been pressure building up. He was such a dominating force that perhaps the others were starting to resent the fact that he wrote everything. He was the producer, arranger, singer. He was the man in charge, really, of the whole project. So I guess the others wanted their say and the chance to write some more songs of their own. And it didn't really work that well, unfortunately.
Tom ultimately left because he didn't feel that he was getting any creative outlet, and that was what led John to say, well, you guys have to do this. No one ever wanted to write and sing. Why would we want to? We were in a band with one of the best rock singers ever. What? It doesn't. Why would we want to do something that would so, run us into a wall? That the outcome was inevitable. The band was going to break up.
Times were changing within the music scene too. By the early '70s, there was all these other different bands all of a sudden emerging. Led Zeppelin, the whole sort of the Philadelphia soul sound. Plus, also at the time, Top 40 radio was getting more into like really kind of weird songs, more novelty kind of numbers. And I think maybe at that point, unless CCR changed quite dramatically, their music wasn't going to be appealing to the same group of people.
When the brother leaves the band, it's gone wrong. So yeah, it was not their best record.
So when the band broke up, everybody was hurt. You know, it was a big wound for everybody individually, and it took many years for me to get over it, put it into perspective, and let it go.
People were very disappointed when Creedence finally broke up, and not long after it started, really, 1972. It was a very short span, really. But in a way, it was a good thing, I suppose, because we were left with this legacy of great songs, Proud Mary and Bad Moon Rising, and so many more great songs from all their albums. It's great that their memory wasn't really destroyed or sullied by producing a stream of flops or duff albums in the aftermath, as happens to many groups that went on for 20 or 30 odd years, dragging out their career.
Left a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day.
They were certainly the most underrated of the American rock bands. People think of them as a fun, good time band, which I think is a great epitaph for them. But they were a phenomenally powerful rock band.
Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river.
Time that they were together, it was pretty magical. And they put out so many great albums and songs that are going to be around forever.
CCR is a top 10 band at every classic rock station in Canada. You should hear CCR about every 3 hours at least, or they're not doing their job. What a great band. It's so relatable, so many songs to choose from. What a great variety and what great depth.
At the Creedence Clearwater Revisited concerts, Doug and I see 3 generations of fans. That just knocks us out, that there are so many new people finding out about Creedence and continuing to do so.
If you come down